AM 1260 KLYC, and our radio audience is joining us now on the video webcast that we're doing from the Evergreen Aviation and Space Museum. Yesterday we were at Aviation, and today we're at the Space Museum. And right behind me you can see kind of the gold bottom part of the lunar excursion module. They called it the LEM. And I know when I was a kid watching them land on the moon, that was just an amazing thing, and the whole nation was watching it. It was exciting. You remember that too?
Oh, absolutely. Very much do. It's so exciting to bring our guests. Most people do not realize, even though they saw it on TV, those that did, exactly how big it is.
The LEM.
The LEM itself.
Now, is this a scale model?
This is a scale model.
And
replica model of it.
Were they all the same, or were there differences between the different missions?
I think they were pretty much, that I remember, is all the same. They carried rovers, which is a rover right behind you, right there, and that was all folded up and inside that LEM.
It's amazing.
It is.
That we could journey all that way, take oxygen to breathe, and be there for, how long were the moon missions?
You know, I'm going to defer that to one of our experts that's going to talk to Don Anderson here pretty shortly.
Okay. So what is your area of expertise here at this
Well, I actually come from aviation side,
okay,
and have more of that. But one of the things that we've prided ourselves on and tried to lead our group into is more training. We have found out that we have to continually train, and that's what we do every Tuesday. In fact, as guests come in, we invite our guests to come into our training sessions and actually see what's going on and how our docents are trained. To start out to be a docent, you have to go to about 50 hours of mentoring, and that's under this tutelage of somebody experienced already. From that point on, then you're on your day, and then how do you learn more about what's there with self-study and that. But we do refreshing every week. I challenge our group with questions and answers on different parts of our artifacts, and the number of artifacts we have just in this building are well over 200 different space artifacts, and we've got aircraft and aircraft parts and helicopters. So we've got a lot going on here.
So are you constantly adding to the display?
Not necessarily adding. I think we're enhancing. We have to move them around at times because we do have special events that happen here. So we get a little different picture of it, but we try to keep sharp on it because we do get people from all over the world asking questions about them.
Describe some of the things that you have here. Of course, we have a LEM, or a replica of the LEM, and the lunar rover.
Sure.
And what are some of the other items you have on the space side?
On the floor of the museum, over behind you, Dave, we have a Titan IV that's in a couple of stages there.
Could you spin that around?
And we also have here one of our engines from our Atlas. We also have a ring right above it that actually shows that part of the communication part of the launch vehicle. But we have a variety of engines on the floor. We have an aircraft not too far off. We have X-15. We have the SR-71. We've got several of our Vietnam era and even earlier jet aircraft here on the floor as well.
Amazing. And we have one of our docents here running our camera. Sir, what's your name? You're Dean Anderson.
Don Anderson.
Don Anderson. Yeah. Don Anderson with two N's. Don, thank you for running our camera. So what do we have over us here? This is how they recovered the astronauts.
Well, actually, this display right here, Dave, is actually the Apollo capsule and suspended by what would have been at that time one of the recovery helicopters. This is strictly for display, and that's not how they actually pull them out of the water. Way too heavy of a capsule to even lift out of the water. They were there to rescue the astronauts at the time of recovery. The actual recovery of the capsule was done by the aircraft carrier and actually hoisted above one of the elevators that would be down closer to the water.
So they actually did recover the capsule. They didn't let it sink.
They did. Our three different capsules that we did to get to the moon were all recovered from the ocean.
Where are they now?
Pardon?
Where are they now?
Well, where are they?
Yeah.
There are various different places. There are different museums. We're very pleased to have the last of the Mercury program, the Mercury capsule, in one of our theaters right here on the floor. It never flew.
Really? Oh, it's not. What is this one?
This is the Apollo.
Is this a replica?
This is a replica.
So it's designed to look like it came through the atmosphere.
Exactly.
Okay. Very interesting. What are your hours of operation here?
Well, we're open every day, 9 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon. 7 days a week.
Now, if we could spin over here and take a look at, it looks like the Soviets have a lunar excursion module as well. Is that what is that?
That's another rover, just like ours. They prepared one to rove around on the moon as well.
Okay. And you can go ahead and zoom into that. There's a zoom on the top of the camera. On the toggle switch there you go. There's the zoom, and if you're watching online, you can watch him zoom into that's a Soviet version of... Did they actually send machines like that to the moon?
Yes, they did.
Okay. And so what you can see is the big round part is the solar collector to power it?
I'm going to defer a lot of those questions, Dave, to our real expert, is Don Anderson. He's really he's been an enthusiast of our space program, and it's better for us to tell you that we don't know and defer it to somebody that does.
All right. Well, we appreciate you welcoming us to the Space Museum. There are a lot of, I remember when I was a kid, all the kids always dreamed of being an astronaut.
Right.
And I don't know if you did, but I did. And you always dreamed about being in space. And there were lots of space shows at the time, Lost in Space, Star Trek, which is still, going on today in some fashion or another. But there's always this mystique and mystery and excitement about going in outer space.
I think today there still is. We have young people that come to us, and they are just at awe, they're wow, and they're still that interest.
Why should we have a museum like this?
To preserve the things that have happened in the past has not always been done and has always been able to be uncovered, but we sure have the opportunity. And today, our museum is extremely unique than most that people have traveled to. We allow our guests to get right up close and touch our exhibits. And that's not always true in many other museums. They can experience things, they can get the hands-on, they get to talk to our docents, bring these things alive. And that's what our training does. It helps keep us fresh and able to bring those artifacts to life for our guests.
As I was bringing in the equipment this morning for the broadcast and the video webcast, I saw a tire from the space shuttle. It's an actual tire from the space shuttle. It looks like some of the rubber is worn off.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a lot of weight. And remember, that's not that doesn't have engines to make it fly. It's just like a big glider. And so it's coming in pretty fast, pretty hot. That's one of the unique things we also have at our museum, Dave. We can allow our guests to actually fly a space shuttle on a simulator. And we've had many pilots, astronauts even, have actually been on our simulator here. They say it's one of the best they've ever been on. 3 different levels of expertise of being able to actually fly a space shuttle.
That's amazing. How much does it cost to come in here and see the exhibits?
Well, we have a varying price from students to seniors as well, but right around the $24, $25 range to visit. And that goes to all of our museums, not that are on the campus, but that allows you to see quite a bit, more than you can see even in one day.
So when you buy admission, can you come back for the second day, or is it daily
Well,
admission?
actually, we have a day pass, but we have one of the most wonderful opportunities, too. We allow our guests that if they want to come back more, we can allow them to come in and join our membership. And the membership can be a wonderful asset for them, not only to continually come back here, Dave, but they can go to 350 other museums around the world. And as long as it's away from about 90 miles away from your host museum, you have that opportunity at a couple of different levels of our membership. Great way to see it. Other discounts are available. Great activities during the year. All types of special events, education opportunities, not only for adults but for the kids. We have different things going on all year long.
Tell me the price range of the membership. For example, let's say we want to buy the membership and go to the other museums and this whenever we want to.
The first one is our family membership, and that's at $120.
A year.
That's for 1 year. That allows you to bring you and another adult, and your children and your family, extended family is that are 16 and under. Then our next level that allows you to also go that is $145, and that's 4 adults coming in and the children coming in right along with it.
And you can come in here and buy a pass at the Evergreen Aviation.
Anywhere in any one of our counters, gift shops, and that they can sell you a membership.
Alrighty. Jim Cameron, what are your hours here?
Once again, starting at 9 in the morning and 5 in the afternoon.
And more to come here on KLYC AM 1260. We're going to go back to music here on the radio station. We'll be having more video pictures streaming on our website, KLYC.us, and more to come from the Evergreen Aviation and Space Museum. Today we are in the space side of the museum, and we'll be right back. This is AM 1260 KLYC. People that are watching online, KLYC.us, let's spin over there if we could, talking to our Jim, our cameraman, Jim Cameron. Let's take a look at the Soviet lunar rover. If you could, there's a toggle switch on top of the camera that allows you to zoom. Thank you very much. Now explain what we're seeing over there.
I will do that. It's a fun thing. Could I tell you a little story about it first?
Sure.
Would you mind?
Yeah, go ahead and leave the camera on
it's
that.
actually called the Lunachad, and it's a good thing we have these little dampeners on the microphones here, but that's literally the way it sounds, like you're clearing your throat. And the Lunachad is a lunar rover, as you already indicated, that was built by the then Soviet Union, now Russia. And it landed about a year after Neil Armstrong landed on the surface of the moon. So it was a little bit later. That was after the Soviets gave up their attempt to land on the moon because their moon rocket wouldn't function. They launched a huge rocket 4 times, blew up 4 times. They finally gave up. So this was a completely automated rover, and it was sent to the moon. It landed automatically, and then as you can see, it has little wheels, and it's got the lid that opens up with solar cells on it. And so those solar cells are to recharge its batteries. And at night, it would close up that lid because when I say night or in the darkness, the temperature will range from 250 degrees positive Fahrenheit during the daytime, go down to 380 degrees minus, just not even as the sun goes down, but if you walked from the sun into a shadow, which is why the astronauts had to wear these completely contained spacesuits that were little spacecraft that they walked around in. So the Soviets landed this. They actually landed 2 of them. This is an exact replica of one. It tootled around on the Martian surface for 10
lunar
months.
surface.
Sorry, thank you.
Okay.
Lunar surface for 10 months, digging and taking pictures and sending back something like 20,000 pictures. The story about it is that you never know who you're going to have visit here at the museum. And I was up at the front counter, and 2 people walked up and looked just like you and me. And the first thing they said when they walked up to the counter was, "We heard you have a Lunachad." And right at first, I thought maybe I had some kind of disease. I couldn't figure out what they were talking about. Seriously, I was like, what? And they said, we heard you have a Lunachad. And I had to think and think. I went, oh, yeah, we do. Well, that's all they wanted to see. And they were from the Ukraine. They were people who had grown up in school as kids, and that was all over their TV screens, and that was what the teachers showed them and talked about. They had to write reports and draw pictures of it. And they came back here and were just reverential around this thing. They'd never seen anything like that before. And I thought to myself, this is a different museum to a lot of different people depending on who comes. It was a really fun day.
One of the nice things that I've noticed about the Evergreen Museum is that you have both Russian and American airplanes. And like over on the aviation side, you have the Messerschmitt 262, the first jet used in combat in World War II. You have a replica of that. And so it's not only American spacecraft and aircraft, you also have other nationalities as well. In fact, I think it's the F-15 Eagle. There's a very similar counterpart that was developed by Russia. And you have actually the real airplanes from both sides.
Yes, we do. We have a very representative set of space artifacts and aircraft as well. As you've already indicated on the Lunachad and some of the jets that we have. It's really pretty neat. And as Jim mentioned earlier, we love to do training here. And one of the training sessions that I had fun with is I put together a training program that said, "Welcome to the Evergreen Soviet Space Museum." And all we did was walk around as if we were from the Soviet Union or Russia and look at all of the things that we have here that tell the story of how amazing their program really was. And just to give you an idea, Dave, this is pretty amazing. I didn't realize this completely until I prepared the training session. I had an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper with small print that was filled with all the firsts that the Russians through the Soviet Union achieved in space. But it's sort of like if you're watching football and the team that you like is doing a great job between the 20-yard line. You know what I mean? They're passing back and forth and they're running like crazy, but they never get to the end zone. So they set all these pass completion records and they set all these rushing records. But the goal was who was going to be first to the moon. And we were first to the moon, and nobody pays attention to all the rest of that. It's kind of sad, but the record of it is here if you're interested.
Very interesting. There's a, I don't know if you can see it with the camera, but there's a bank of instruments over there, a bunch of gauges and dials. What is that? Go ahead and zoom on over that, and go ahead and zoom in on so people watching online can see that.
A number of the things that we have here that are really worth coming if you're interested in the detail of aircraft and space is we have a lot of the support equipment. So what that is mobile transportable equipment for launching the largest booster rocket that we have in the museum here, which is the Titan II. So that one that's going clear up to the ceiling with the white shroud on the top that would have a satellite in it, sure. That's part of the equipment that was being used to launch that. So it's dials and gauges for the fuel, for the oxidizer, those kinds of things. If you go around the side, there's even more support equipment there. And I might just mention that we also have the SR-71 Blackbird spy plane here. And one of the things that makes it so interesting to visit this particular museum is we've got a whole lot of the support equipment for it. So electronic intelligence, generating, jamming, or recording signals. We've got all the different kinds of cameras that were used. And we've got what they use to start the thing up. You know, just lots of different pieces of support equipment that really bring it to life when you tell the story of the aircraft.
Interesting. And so we should mention you can go to our website, and right now you can see a guy in a spacesuit. Let's zoom into the spacesuit right now, if we could. Jim, go ahead. There we go. Explain what people that are online on our website, KLYC.us, are seeing. And to our radio listeners, in the display here, there is a mannequin, dummy dressed up in a spacesuit, right under the lunar excursion module. And that suit had life support for how long? How long could they live in that suit?
That's a very good question, and that's the kind of detail that I don't have at the tip of my tongue.
Oh, okay.
But they could be out for the better part of a day. I do know that. Definitely a work day, much like you'll see in the International Space Station. They go out for 8, 9, 10-hour work shifts, so plenty of the time that they would need to be on the surface of the moon. And I like to think about this a little bit like maybe we do when we come out of our house and we get in our car, we go off and drive someplace. You can't help it. In your car, you have personal items, and you have things that go with you wherever you go. It's a little extension of your house. When you drive somewhere, that's you going to wherever it is you're going. Well, in a hostile environment like the moon, where there is no atmosphere whatsoever as far as breathing is concerned, and it's very hot and very cold, and the pressures are completely different on the Earth than they are on the moon, and there's only 1/6 of the gravity, the human body is not designed to operate in that environment. So if you think of a spacesuit sort of like a little bit of the Earth that they took with them wherever they went, it literally was a spacecraft. So they were taking the Earth's atmosphere and everything that they needed from the Earth inside that suit as they stepped out into that completely hostile environment.
Now, is the suit also pressurized to keep the body under pressure so they wouldn't get the bends? Or
the suit was not pressurized in that way because the situation is exactly the opposite on the moon from what it would be going down into the ocean.
Okay.
When you go down into the ocean, the pressures increase.
Right.
And so what happens is that you can get a lot of pressure on the inside of your body, and when you come back quickly out, the gases that have dissolved in your blood are sort of released, like when you open up a bottle of Martinelli's or a soda or something.
Sure.
You get that psh. The opposite here is that it's already very much less pressure. So yes, they would have pressure in the suit to kind of maintain some level of what the body would be used to on the Earth, and that was merely so they could survive. There wasn't an issue of getting the bends. It was having the air to breathe and a temperature constant that would allow them to function.
How hot would it get in that suit?
I don't know the answer to that, but you know what? Completely comfortable, because they wore an undergarment that was full of all kinds of little tubes, and they would circulate refrigerated water that was provided by the backpack that the guy is wearing all through the body to maintain the core temperature of the astronaut.
So they had a little refrigerant or cooling system going on with them.
The backpack is very sophisticated in what it was capable of doing. But the other thing that it would do is it would throw your center of gravity off, because you got this heavy thing hanging on the back of you. Now it would weigh 1/6 what it would on the Earth. But if you watch the astronauts, they're always leaning forward as they're kind of bounding around.
Sure.
That's to stay kind of upright. And every once in a while, they'll get working on a rock or digging somewhere, and they lose their balance. You'll see them. There's some great video of him going backward, going, whoa, falling down to his back and having to turn over like a turtle and get back up again.
So they could actually fall down in that. They'd have to roll over.
Not they could actually fall down. They did actually fall down.
Probably several times.
Yeah, more than once. And the way you could really tell the mark of an astronaut who had actually been on the moon is that his suit was sort of charcoal gray, which is the natural color of the lunar surface, and they would just have that stuff all over them when they came back into the lunar module.
What do you find to be the most interesting exhibit here in the space side of the Evergreen Museum?
Wow, the most interesting exhibit. Goodness me. You're asking somebody who's like a kid in a candy store. I like it all. Wow. I probably would, it'd be hard to pick one. If I had to pick one, and thinking in terms of a visitor experience, I think I would choose the Titan II booster rocket here. It was originally an ICBM, Intercontinental Ballistic Missile. When the Challenger exploded and then we had one less shuttle for a period of time, they took a bunch of these missiles and reconverted them over to be used as satellite launchers. And so instead of having a warhead on the top or a big nuclear weapon, it could put various Department of Defense and weather satellites up into orbit. But what makes this interesting to me is that we have actual equipment from Vandenberg Air Force Base in California, the stands that the rocket is sitting on. And in the middle level of this exhibit, you can go in and actually take the 26-hour countdown, more than a day, and we've got it in 5 minutes, where you push a button and you hear all the people talking about the aspects needed to make sure that the rocket is ready to launch. And then they bring it all the way down, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it ignites, and you physically feel it in your body. You feel the launch. As it lifts off and curves over, the rocket turns to match the curvature of the Earth. Then it comes back even more, and you can literally feel the sound like a big woofer pounding on your body, which is very much like what a real rocket launch is like, because I've been to several.
Wow. Now on your docent's vest here, your green Evergreen vest, you have the Apollo 11 and the Apollo 17 patch and the Space Shuttle Columbia launch. And you were there and actually watching those launches?
Yes, I had the privilege of going to those particular launches, not because I had a VIP pass and got to sit in the special section, but I've just always been a fan of space travel and especially manned space travel. So the opportunity was there to go. I had to be there for Apollo 11 if there was any way I could physically get there from the West Coast.
That was the first.
That was the very first launch that intended to land on the moon. Got there alongside the Cape at night. Dark, and the floodlights were lighting this thing up. It was maybe about 1/8 of an inch high to the naked eye. It just was spectacular to see 10 miles away. But then slowly dawn came, the sun came up, hazy Florida, and that rocket launched, and it was a jaw-dropper. It was just an amazing experience, and people were crying and cheering and jumping up and down, and it just gave me chills all over to say we're literally leaving our planet and going to another heavenly body for the very first time. And then, happy, sad, I got to go to Apollo 17, which was the only night launch. Now, if you think of the Saturn V, just Dave, you got the opportunity here to look at this rocket. The Saturn V was 3 times taller than the Titan II.
Okay.
3 times taller and 3 times wider. The Saturn V was bigger than the Statue of Liberty by the height of a 6-story building. You can hardly grasp how big that rocket was. Well, Apollo 17 launched at night, shortly after midnight, and so it was dark, literally, middle of the night, and in 1 second, it went from pitch black to the sun coming up. Man-made with the ignition of that incredible Saturn V rocket.
Did you take your sunglasses?
Oh, didn't take my sunglasses,
wow.
But I'm not kidding. If you could imagine, if you've ever been in a room where somebody's playing their stereo real loud, or you had one of those cars drive up where somebody's doing a boombox inside, and you feel it thumping on you. I was 10 miles away, and the sound from the Saturn V hit my body and rocked me back on my heels. I had to lean forward into the sound to stand up straight.
A lot of power in those rockets.
Oh, it's to this day one of the most spectacular visual things I've seen in my entire life.
More to come from the Evergreen Space Museum, AM 1260 KLYC. We're looking at about 9:38. We'll be here until 10 o'clock and talking more about the exhibit. We'll be back with more here on AM 1260 KLYC. Glad you're with us today.
High school sports is brought to you by Davison Auto Parts in McMinnville. High school athletes strive to be the best they can be, and so does Davison Auto Parts. Davison Auto Parts, 1717.
AM 1260 KLYC, and we are back here once again at the Evergreen Aerospace Museum. I've been corrected. It started out as a space museum, but we've had some fixed-wing aircraft, some rotary aircraft that are added here, some fighter jets, and also out here, we were just talking right before we came back, there is a former, I've been calling it a former Air Force One, but I guess it was a former Air Force Two. So what's the difference between Air Force One and Air Force Two?
Other than one digit, Air Force One always carries the President of the United States, and the Vice President or anyone else of some significance in the cabinet that would be traveling in a smaller aircraft for other purposes. Whenever the President is not on board Air Force One, it's no longer Air Force One. It only has that nomenclature. So officially, if the President got on this military version of the DC-9 jet, it could temporarily be Air Force One, but that wasn't the function of this one. It was more a vice presidential aircraft.
And it's on display here. When did that arrive? That arrived about several months ago.
Yes, it did come in 2013. The exact time I don't remember, but the weather was warm, so probably was generally in the summertime.
It's parked out. In fact, we're looking at it right now. If we could spin out there and take a look at it with the camera. I think he's trying to find it. If you're watching online at KLYC.us, you can watch video of our broadcast here. What are the plans for that? Are we going to open it up and let people walk through it?
The plans are still in flux. It would be a really good idea perhaps to consider at some point doing an interview with Stuart Bailey, who's the curator of the museum. He's the one who's given the responsibility for those kind of long-range planning things. It is a beautiful aircraft on the inside, not set up in a passenger way at all, but more like an upper scale corporate jet of some kind. So we would love to be able to go through there, but when you look where it is right now, it's out in the grassy field and it's muddy out there, and so if you were trying to have lines of people coming along and walking up into that, it wouldn't work out real well. So Stuart would be able to tell you. Yeah, so it's not open for getting inside right now, but we, even as volunteers and docents, we want to go inside there and take a look. That'd be great to be able to tell you what it looks like.
But the plan is eventually to let people go inside.
Hopefully, yes.
Okay. When you do that, we'd like to come out and do a broadcast from inside. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, just remember the curator, Stuart Bailey, would be the guy you would want to talk to about that, and he should be able to give you some idea.
It'd be kind of interesting to do that because it's all metal skinned, and we'll have to see if we can get a Wi-Fi signal out of there so we can broadcast.
Yeah, it's a beautiful aircraft. It is a governmental version of the DC-9 twin jet that was just ubiquitous all over the United States and around the world.
A lot of those jets were flying.
A lot of DC-9s were. Yes. Interestingly enough, just this year, the last airline in the U.S. that was flying DC-9s has retired them. And
so they're no longer in commercial flight.
Not the DC-9 itself, like this one. Yeah, it was very interesting to have that happen. Yeah. Could I talk a little bit about how the Aerospace name came about?
Please do.
I appreciate you using that. Now, we are the Evergreen Aviation and Space Museum.
Right.
But one of the things people often don't realize when they come is that we have two huge display buildings that are identical in size. And the way they generally are set up now is the first one that you see when you drive in, which has the Hughes, Howard Hughes wooden airplane referred to as a Spruce Goose, is aviation from the beginning of aviation, the Wright brothers and such, up through 1955. That would be through the Korean conflict. And then generally speaking, when you come across the parking lot to the east side, you come to this building, which originally was called the Space Museum, but now it contains artifacts that take you from 1955 up to the present. And there are three major collections of artifacts here that, to adequately describe them, you would say aerospace, because you've got aircraft, rotary wing helicopters, and space. So three major exhibits: the whole race to the space to get to the moon, and then what happened afterward. And then on the east side of the museum, there's an amazing variety of helicopters. Just kind of, you hardly believe it when you see them. And then on the north side of the museum, quite an extensive collection of aircraft, including, as you pointed out, aircraft from the former Soviet Union or Russia that fought in Vietnam, that have been real significant around the world in other conflicts. And then we have the queen of the exhibit, if you will, and that's the SR-71 Blackbird spy plane with a huge variety of its support equipment around it. So you've got three major collections of artifacts all in one building. That makes for quite an interesting thing.
Let's talk about the Blackbird a little bit. That is kind of the crowning gem, if you would, of what's on this side of the museum. Talk to me about that. What was the plane used for? How fast could it go?
Now, if you would have asked me the question, what's your favorite thing in this whole building, as opposed to just space, the SR-71 would have been a slam dunk.
The Blackbird.
It's my favorite airplane by far.
Why?
Well, a whole number of reasons. When you realize that there was no computer-assisted design when the Blackbird was put together back in the 60s, so it was all done with slide rules. We have docent volunteers right now, and we say slide rules, their eyes glaze over. They don't know what we're talking about. But it was a mechanical device for computing. And they were drafting tables, literally making drawings of an airplane that had never been built. Now, this airplane, you asked, how fast does it go? Pardon me. How fast does it go and how high does it fly? It flies over 80,000 feet high. Some people will tell you it even got as high as 100,000 feet. I wasn't there. I can't prove that.
Sure.
But around 80,000 feet high, and it went 3 times the speed of sound at that altitude, which is over 2,000 miles an hour. Just an amazingly fast aircraft. Now, it was built as a follow-on to the U-2 spy plane, which flew very high but slow. It was ultimately shot down by the Soviet Union, and one of our pilots was captured. It was a big embarrassment.
Yeah.
So they thought, so if we go high and fast, they're going to have a much harder time shooting us down. So that's where this airplane came from. And it utilizes early stealth technology. It's not completely stealthy, but it looks a lot smaller in a radar signature than it truly is. And I also like the fact that they had to solve all kinds of difficult problems. For example, the SR-71 is not built out of aluminum, like most all airplanes are, or composites, where it's sophisticated plastic. It's built out of titanium. And here's another story for you.
Sure.
It's one of the things you get from docents. One of the fun things about being here is that the United States doesn't have deposits of titanium. And this is a spy plane. Guess where the significant deposits of titanium ore are in the world?
The Soviet Union.
Good man. Keep that up, and we'll put one of these green vests on you. You come back here as a volunteer.
Well, it's very ironic that we're going to mine the material from your country, then we use it to come and spy on you.
That's right. That's exactly what happened. See, you can tell this story better than I can. You got the idea of the punchline. The United States, the CIA, and Lockheed got ore shipped to Mexico, supposedly by a company that was going to make big industrial pots, shipped it across the border of the United States, manufactured in titanium, made into SR-71s, and sent back to spy on the people we got the ore from. I think that's the American way, you know.
Oh, that's typical of the Cold War. There was a lot of deceit going on. There was a lot of,
sleight of hand.
Oh, very much so.
Looking this way or that way. I'll tell you a few more things about the SR-71. At cruise, it would routinely have areas on the surface that got at least 600 degrees hot and could get up to 800 degrees hot. So aluminum would melt at that temperature, so titanium would not. Nothing this size as a production airplane had ever been built out of titanium. They had to figure all that stuff out. They had to figure out how to design the shape of the airplane so that radar would hit it and bounce a different direction other than come straight back to the person who was trying to catch it. And not only that, something I've learned being here in this museum is that I never realized that an airplane that's going supersonic speed...
Is that why it got so hot?
Yes.
Okay.
As fast as it was going, and then the friction of the air. Yes.
Sure.
That's going supersonic speed. Any aircraft, like the F-15 or any of these ones you're hearing about, the air coming into the engine itself has to be subsonic. It has to be going slower than the speed of sound in order to not extinguish the engine. Can you imagine that?
So how do you do that?
If you look at the SR-71, it has one of the most unique design features. You can't miss it. If you look at the engine nacelle, there's a big old cone, a big spike sticking out the front of it. You could do a whole show on the SR-71, and there are people here who could give you a day's worth of information. But what would happen is that cone would move in and out, depending on the speed of the aircraft, to move the shock wave back and forth just inside that nacelle so that as the air got to the engine, it was slow enough air breathe and not be extinguished. It's amazing. This engine also could operate as a regular fan or turbojet, like you'd have on some of the earlier jets at low speed. And then at high speed, they bypass a significant amount of the air around the engine itself, ignite it in the back, and shoot it out the back directly with an incredible exhaust that had, 23 shockwave cones in it. The exhaust is coming out so fast. So the same engine nacelle and engine area could be used kind of like in low-speed air-breathing flight, and then in a ramjet type setup at high speed is really amazing.
So there was a significant amount of engineering that had to go on. They had to invent a lot of this stuff.
Yes, they were making up stuff that people hadn't really even done before. One other thing you hear about the SR that's kind of fun is it leaks when it's sitting on the ground. That's because when it's going so fast, the skin gets so hot, it has to expand. So it's not like, you turn your faucet on in the sink and there's fuel going all over the ground, but it would leak. They would not give it a full fuel load. They'd take it off into the sky and then top off the tanks from a tanker, and then up to speed it would go, and as it got hot, the pieces that were slightly apart would come together and seal right up. And it was supposed to.
So they purposely made a little bit of gap in the
Exactly.
joints in there so that when it expanded because it was so hot, then it would seal up.
Exactly, they designed it in.
So that's why it leaked.
Yep, by design, as opposed to what we usually run into.
Interesting. Some of the other, let's see, we've got about 8 minutes to go here in the show. Let's talk about some of the other high-profile exhibits, or some of the very interesting exhibits that we haven't talked about. Of course, we have the Titan. Is that a replica, or is that that's an actual Titan
Thanks
missile?
for asking that, because we do have both replicas and actual artifacts here. The Titan II that we have is the only one on display, the Titan II SLV. Remember when I said they changed it from a atomic weapon launcher to a satellite launcher? The SLV stands for Space Launch Vehicle. So this is the only display anywhere that you can come to in a museum and see the Titan II SLV. And one thing I'd like to mention about the Titan II that also makes it a favorite of mine is it was used as the launcher for all of the Project Gemini flights. And you see the beautiful gold circle facing you up there. That's the rear hanging from the ceiling.
Okay.
That's the rear right over the top.
Oh, okay.
Right
Go ahead and zoom into that.
That's the back end of the Gemini capsule, and that was step 2. Mercury was step 1. To say, can we put a man in orbit around the Earth and bring him back safely? And yes, we can. Gemini was to practice all the things we needed to learn to do to go to the moon, but in Earth orbit. And every single Gemini capsule, which had 2 astronauts on board, and they figured out the 4 things they needed to go to the moon. Could we pilot a spacecraft, change orbits, speed up, slow down? Could they rendezvous, bring 2 different spacecraft launched at different times together? Could they stay in space long enough to get to the moon and back, which could be up to 2 weeks, 2 guys in that little capsule? And could they exist outside in the spacesuit like we were talking about before? All of those things were proven in about 1.5 years in Gemini flights. And the thing that I love so much about Gemini is before Gemini, we were way behind where the Soviet Union and the Russians were in space. In that period of 1.5 years, we went way ahead and took all the records that existed up to that point. It poised us and gave us the success we needed to go to the moon.
So the Gemini program was very important. You always think about the Apollo as being the crown glory and the moon launch and so on and so forth, but Gemini actually set the stage for that.
Exactly right. I couldn't say it better myself.
Very interesting. Beautiful building here, and we talked before while we were in one of the breaks just a short time ago. There is a Grumman jet.
It's
here.
a Gulfstream jet,
Gulfstream jet.
a corporate jet.
And that was used to train shuttle pilots.
Yes, it was. And if I could just mention quickly that not only do you want to wander around the inside of the 2 main display buildings at the Evergreen Aviation and Space Museum, but give yourself time to wander around the outside of the buildings, because the collection of aircraft and even rocket-type things around the outsides of the building are also really amazing. The aircraft that you're referring to was a training airplane that the shuttle pilots would practice in repeatedly, landing at the Cape in Florida and other places to get the feel, seat of the pants feel, not just a simulator. What's it going to be like to really, you get one and done? There was no engine to fire up and do a go-around like you can on a commercial jet. You had to line up, come down, and flare out and land that thing on the runway the first time. So they would do it over and over and over again. And it's configured so that aerodynamically, as soon as they cut their engine power, it would fly just exactly like a shuttle. It had instrumentation like a shuttle. As you can tell by the successful landings of the space shuttle, it was successful in its purpose.
Does it look like a shuttle
Nope,
on the outside?
It does not. It is
But it flies like a shuttle.
Yep, white painted aircraft. It's got a NASA blue stripe on it. It would look like a shuttle if you sat in the cockpit.
It's amazing to me. How many? Do you know off the top of your head how many shuttle missions there were?
I do not know that off the top of my head.
Okay.
But
Sorry to throw all these curves
No,
at
that's
you.
okay. Well, sometimes we know. But believe it or not, you can find this stuff relatively easily. Another thing that's nice about this museum is that if you have any of those QR code programs or apps on your phone, we've got little QR code apps all around the museum. You stick your phone up there and bloop, 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 it pulls up a page from the web that tell you all you want to know about these various things. I don't know how many shuttle launches there were. I wished I did.
What was amazing to me about the shuttle program was that, we had 2 disasters where we lost 2 crews, but none of them happened on landing. All of the landings were successful. And when you mentioned that it was one and done, you have to land right the first time because you can't power up and go around. As you always can watch the shuttle come in for landing, you always kind of held your breath because you realize that the one shot at it and that's it. You're going to come down one way or the other.
Yeah, those guys were so good at it. And I'm reminded of a picture that's in the Mercury Theater where we have an actual Mercury spacecraft where one astronaut was put into orbit. There's a historical photograph on the wall, and it's got the Mercury 7, the first guys who were chosen to be our astronauts. And they were in a news conference, and one guy asked them, "So how many of you think you're going to come back alive from your mission?" They all have their hands up. And John Glenn's got both his hands up. And that's the attitude that those guys have. They're so professional. I don't even think they work up a sweat or their heart rate even goes up doing the kind of thing where we're going. But before you get out of here today, Dave, if you'd like to have that experience, one of the really neat things that we have here in the space side of the museum, we have a space shuttle landing simulator. You can actually sit in a chair here and get a feel for what it's like to look out that front window and see whether or not you can grease it in there or send a big bill to the government for what you did to one of their space shuttles.
How much does a shuttle cost?
I do not know.
I'm like...
A lot.
I'll have to give you the questions in advance.
No, I appreciate that. That information's all here somewhere.
Okay.
Either find it here.
There is a lot of information.
Oh, yeah, or through the QR codes you can get that sort of thing. But one of the things you learn in talking to me as a docent, we got a lot of stories and a lot of fun things about people, but the numbers escape me pretty easily, and I need help to have that available.
What is the most weird or interesting question people have asked you?
Wow. Nothing comes to mind. Isn't that interesting?
Okay.
Can't really.
Will they fly again?
Yeah, can't.
I asked that question yesterday about the some of the airplanes over in like the B-17 Flying
Yes.
Fortress. That actually was a flying aircraft before they brought it in.
Absolutely.
It's been
It
here
was
for
flyable.
been here for a decade.
Yes.
But I guess with the right servicing and all the pieces are there, and you can fly that thing again.
That's true about a number of aircraft here. Not all of them, but a number of significant airplanes here could be flyable without much effort to do that, for sure.
What about Air Force 2?
Well, they flew it in here,
Yeah, that's true.
so I think it's definitely could fly right back out again under certain circumstances.
So a lot of these fighter jets that are here, it looks like some of them are missing some of the pieces on the tail, like this green American fighter I hear by the Air Force 2. Notice how it has its rudder that's missing.
That's almost an optical illusion for you.
Oh, it's not missing?
Because one of the things that we'll often do with these aircraft is we'll turn the rudder so that it provides less resistance to the wind. That's the direction the wind is coming from. So the rudder on that aircraft is actually turned like this.
You're actually right. It's still there.
If you look carefully, yeah.
And you do that so the wind doesn't catch it too hard.
Exactly.
Okay. What are some of the challenges about now? Wind has got to be. You've got to do a real good job of anchoring these planes down because sometimes we have some wind come through here.
Mm-hmm. But of course, they're designed to be outdoors. They were outdoors in the bases around the world, other places. The one that's the biggest challenge, I think, is the 747 that's sitting on top of the Wings and Waves Water Park.
Because it's going to catch a lot of wind there.
Yeah, and it's poised to take off, which of course we hope will never happen. But that airplane actually is sitting on its own steel support structure. It's not on the building at all. There's a steel support structure going down through the building into the ground that anchors that aircraft. And it's got welded attach points, at the various landing gear. So again, I don't always have the numbers at the tip of my tongue. Others could. Stuart Bailey certainly would.
But it's
I
anchored.
understand that it's designed to withstand at least 100-mile-an-hour wind. At least mile-an-hour wind.
Eventually, at some point, the pieces would start coming off, but at least the plane isn't going to take off.
I don't think that plane's going anywhere anytime soon.
Okay.
And it's a thrill to go up in there. You actually go into the water slides by climbing up into that airplane. You evacuate out of that airplane into the water slides to come back down into the building.
Have you been on that water slide?
I have been on that water slide.
Is it fun?
I've lived to tell about it. Yes.
To tell
it was
about
a
it.
thrill. I was in there with my grandkids. We had a blast.
When is the water slide running?
There's a winter schedule and a summer schedule, and the hours change according to vacation times like winter break or spring break. Hours are not in my head off the top of my head, but it operates in a reduced schedule, something like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday during this time of the year, but and then every day in the summer. But you can go on the website or the evergreenmuseum.com or .org, and the hours will be there.
So is the water slide part of the museum?
It is part of this complex, yes. And when we say where we are here, we are part of the Michael King Smith Educational Institute. Michael King Smith was the eldest son of Delford Smith, who founded and owns Evergreen. He was the one who had the vision for getting aircraft and having a museum. Michael King Smith Educational Institute is a 501c3 nonprofit, and the chapel and the water park and both of these display buildings that we call the museum and the IMAX building, which is now the digital theater, all are underneath that umbrella.
So the IMAX building, is that the regular theater?
Yes, it's a smaller building in between the two main artifact-filled buildings. It has a theater in it now that's digital, that has a screen that's 6 stories high and 7 stories wide, and multiple sound system. It's an amazing place to go see a movie.
And that's attached to the theater or a separate building?
The theater itself is office buildings, and one whole end of it is the theater experience.
Alrighty. Don, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
We are looking forward to coming back and doing a show on January 28th. It's going to be 9 to 10 a.m. We're going to be doing a Spruce Goose broadcast from inside the flight deck of the Spruce Goose. We're going to be shooting videos, so people, if you want to see, we're going to have fun doing it. And we'll be shooting video, streaming it live on our website, KLYC.us, and doing the radio broadcast as well.
Do we have time for a short story about the Spruce Goose?
Yeah, go right ahead.
If you'll notice on my vest here, I've got this interesting pin, and that's because I worked for an airline called Hughes Air West.
I remember
It's
that.
Actually owned by Howard Hughes, the yellow airplane's top banana in the West. Now, this was supposed to be called Heavenly Thrusting Dihedrals or something. But if you remember that the man's name was Howard Hughes, you look carefully at this logo, what do you notice?
They look like H's.
They certainly do, don't they?
Howard Hughes.
Howard
H-H.
Hughes. So Hughes Air West. So when Howard Hughes died and the Hughes holdings began to get rid of stuff that mattered to him but weren't significant to them, they decided to unload the Spruce Goose, which Howard Hughes paid $1 million a year to maintain for 33 years in a secret blacked-out building. Because I was working for this airline, I wheedled and begged and got myself onto a group that went down to tour the Spruce Goose in its original Howard Hughes hangar. I got to walk in there for people who had spent 33 years keeping people out, and all of a sudden they got a phone call saying, you're going to be doing tours and welcome people in. The looks on their faces, they were just conflicted. It was amazing. But to walk in that building and look and say, this is exactly the way it was the day Howard Hughes walked out of here. Something I'll never forget. And when I moved and retired and came to Oregon, I knew that the airplane was here, and that's what drew me to first connect with the Evergreen Aviation and Space Museum.
So where was the Howard Hughes hangar? Where was it?
It was in Long Beach.
Long Beach.
Which the Long Beach Harbor down by Los Angeles is where he taxied the aircraft, and it had its one and only flight.
So they put it in the building, they parked it,
sealed it up,
and there it sat for 33 years.
33 years.
And Howard Hughes paid $1 million a year to just keep it in mothballs.
Yep.
For 33 years.
Now, he didn't own it for a long time. He was paying for that, and he didn't even have title to it. He didn't actually get title to it. It was owned by the government because it was majorly paid for by you and me with our tax dollars. But he got title to it near the end of his life. But always, it was one of the big loves of his life that aircraft got built.
The Spruce Goose.
Yeah, he hated that name, by the way. That's
Why
a
did it
derogatory name?
Why was it called the Spruce Goose? There's no spruce or
that good. For
there's no. Yeah, I learned this yesterday. There's no spruce used in the making of the Spruce Goose.
About 1%.
Okay, 1%.
But I'm not kidding, Dave. We're going to put one of these green vests on you here pretty soon. You're doing well with the stuff you're picking up.
So, why the Spruce Goose?
It was a very political thing after the end of World War II. The airplane was built so that you could lift basically the equivalent of a shipload of stuff off the water, and the Nazi U-boats couldn't torpedo it. That was its purpose.
Right.
But it was such a complex thing to build, and nobody had ever made anything like that. It was 5 times bigger than anything else that was time, that it didn't get finished till after the war was over, and there was really no reason for it. So for political reasons, and I know we can't relate to that at all these days as we look at Washington. Some of the senators of one party wanted to use Howard Hughes and his airplane to embarrass the president of another party. So they brought Howard Hughes in to testify before Congress, and so they thought up names of what a waste this is, what a boondoggle this is, and they called it the Flying Lumberyard, and they called it the Spruce Goose, both of which were meant to embarrass Howard, and he hated that. So it's primarily built out of birch. But as we love to say here, who's going to come see the birch perch? Nobody ever heard of that.
The birch perch.
You want to come see the Spruce Goose.
There you go. So, and the name was born.
Yeah, and it just never goes away. Like nicknames. I think many of us might have gotten a nickname when we were in school that we don't want anybody to know.
The question that I asked them yesterday when we were over talking about the Spruce Goose was, it only flew 50, 70 feet off the ground, off the water, and landed, and they texted it, and only flew once. Could it actually have flown its mission, which was flying troops and supplies, but mainly troops, over the Atlantic Ocean to Europe? 750 troops.
Yeah.
And I was told yes.
No. Actually, the answer is no.
No?
Yeah.
It's a different answer today.
Not with the engine it had on board.
Okay.
Design-wise, it could, but it has the largest piston engines available to an aircraft in the day that it was built.
Right.
But if you talk to people who aerodynamically know what they're talking about, it could not be fully loaded and complete its mission all the way across the ocean.
It couldn't carry enough fuel?
It would have needed bigger. It didn't have enough power.
Oh.
It would have needed bigger engines in order to do that.
Than what was available for it in the day and age that it was built.
Yeah, which is not to say that couldn't happen in a fair amount of time. If you look at these big, huge engines that they put on the commercial transport these days, they start out rated at one power setting, and then they tweak them and they do things to the blades and they do other things, and they continually increase the amount of thrust they can get out of those engines over time, which increases the amount of weight that an airplane carries, still using quote-unquote pre-existing engines. Interesting that.
Inquisitive minds want to know.
Oh, this is a place for inquisitive minds, I'll tell you. And even if your inquisitive mind is taking a vacation, this is a place that'll help get it spooled back up in action again.
Okay, well, we need to get back to music on AM 1260 KLYC. Don and Jim, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Again, we'll be back here on the 28th of January, Tuesday, 9 to 10 a.m. We're broadcasting inside from the Spruce Goose. And then some point in the future, when they're doing broadcasts from inside, or not broadcasts, I'm just one-track mind here as a broadcaster, but when they're doing public tours of Air Force 2, we'd like to do a broadcast from inside Air Force 2. Talk about that and shoot some video and let people see what it looks like.
Well, thank you much for the opportunity. It's our pleasure to talk about a place that matters a lot to us and we love to share with others.
All righty. AM 1260 KLYC, and back to it. Glad you're with us today. One of the things we want to do with this radio station is get it out more into the community. We're going to be using the Internet a lot more than has been used in the past. That's one of our goals, and we're going to be, for the first 6 months of this year, working on that and announcing it as we bring those things online. We're streaming live video. We're going to be doing that and in as many locations as we can. There's more gear we have to drag around to do that, but you can see the visions at KLYC.us, and then we're also going to be using the Internet more on various streams that we're going to be birthing here at KLYC. So it's a radio station that we're positioning for the next generation, and my wife and I plan on owning this station for many years to come and plan on growing it into the future, and then that includes the Internet and high technology and video and audio and multimedia and so on and so forth, and choices. I'll just leave it at that. More choices on KLYC than what you have today. Interesting. AM 1260 KLYC, let's get back to it. Glad you're with us today. Join us for the cruise.
This is from 72 also, about being on the road. It's called Turn the Page. Yeah.
1